So, when you finally finish your backlit Game Boy Color, where do you take your first late-night gaming road trip?
I'm Mac Fraser.
I'm Backrolls, and we're the Nintendo Nerds.
We're a new comedy and gaming duo here to help you craft and play your way to a better day.
We met in the not-too-distant past during some spirited online Mario Kart, and as it turns out, we share a love for art, gaming, and all things Nintendo.
And we want to share our nerdy knowledge with you.
So stick around, because in today's video, we are joined by Aaron, professional web designer for Square Enix, and all-around terrific Game Boy builder. Aaron has digitally produced web pages for some of Square's most notable hits in the past few years, including Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, and Nier Automata, as well as titles you can find on the Nintendo Switch, such as I Am Setsuna and Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Why, hello. That was quite a summary of my professional work there. Kind of a little jarring, but
we did the best we could. Yeah.
We got to give people a good insight into you.
Yeah, it's like, wow, these guys really did their research. Usually, I'm the one that has to tell people what it is that I do exactly, but you guys obviously did your fair bit of research before this conversation.
Oh, well, thanks. We appreciate that. But we were excited to talk to you because you're the great builder here. We don't believe in the phrase, those who can't do teach. We believe those who can't do interview.
Interview! Well,
Yeah.
Aaron, thanks so much. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Let's jump right into this and into a little bit of your backstory. You've been working with Square Enix for a little over 4 years now, but when did you find your first great venture in life was going to be web design? Was it something you were doing since the GeoCities days, or was it something you found later in life?
As far as web design goes, I'm definitely one of those use cases where the profession sort of found me later in life. I didn't attend high school, or even, my studies during college. I never really thought of web design was something that I was going to pursue as a profession in my career. Early on, I was always really fascinated by video games just in general, and I think for most people that grew up with video games, and you kind of fall down this rabbit hole of, is there any sort of way that I can get into doing video games for a living? Because that would be the ultimate thing, for a kid. That's like the goal. So when I finally got to college, I knew that illustration was something that I had a huge passion for, and just eventually kind of stumbled onto the idea of doing design for print. So there's a lot of video game publications at the time. This is before everything just sort of became more digitalized. I had a focus on trying to be a print designer for magazines. Wanted to eventually try to find my way into the video game publications like EGM, Game Informer magazine, right? And, for a time, that was sort of our generation's way of getting a lot of the video game news. We were super excited to go to the grocery store and, see the latest issue, and not knowing what sort of coverage or news was going to be in those pages. So it was really exciting. And of course, after I graduated college, this was around 2009, so I kind of got out of college a little bit sooner than the rest of the friends that were my age. And so that was at that moment, the economy sort of tanked, and I was sort of left in this position of not really being able to find work at a design capacity. Obviously, the economy tanking, I think, was a big reason for it, but also just out of location, there's just not a lot of design opportunities of, where we came from in Florida. And just kind of floated around for a couple of years, just unemployed, trying to find what it is that I was actually meant to do. And fortunately enough, I still had that drive to adapt myself. So I was like, okay, I can't really see a future in me doing print design. So what can I do? How can I adapt the skills that I've learned in school? And I took a crack at doing some freelance and found this passion for web design, and over time, through various jobs, eventually landed a role out here in San Diego, California, and have just been moving up since then. Initially, I got in through the music industry as an intern for production design, and then gradually just kind of progressed my way, moving up the ranks. And once they actually knew who I was, it was like, I want to try to do some web design. And then, obviously, long story short, worked through various digital agencies and advertising and marketing for various industries, and just one day applied for a web designer position at Square Enix. And I was sort of skeptical at first because I never thought that there was going to be a moment in my life where I would have the opportunity to even be considered as a candidate to work at such a prestigious company. And I saw that the job listing was, my goodness, I think it was like over like 3 months old or something like that. And I was like, they surely found somebody for the position at this point. It must have been an error. They probably left it up by accident. But needless to say, I submitted my application and resume just so that they had it on file. And lo and behold, like a week later, I get a call from our HR department, and they're like, we're interested in bringing you in for an interview. And 5 interviews later, I actually landed the role. So it was like the opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm just enjoying every minute that I can.
Well, and that's tremendous, and I think you are passing along a very teachable moment to listeners that if you see a dream job and it's still online and it really feels like an opportune moment, even if it is an old posting, don't miss that opportunity and have the what if for forever. Be like Aaron here and work for your dream company, you know?
Yeah, you never know if it's going to work out unless you actually take a shot.
Exactly.
So I felt that the reason why I obviously wanted to pursue video games is because there was that lifelong dream of, this is something that I absolutely need to try. And I had been working in the music space for 5 or 6 years at that point, and felt like I wanted to reinvigorate my passion and interest and kind of put myself in a space that I'm professionally not, at that point I wasn't familiar with it, but internally, like, this is obviously something that I think about every day. Just like as a fan of video games, it's just something that's kind of always at the forefront of my mind. And I felt like the experiences that I gained through the past companies that I worked with, that there is obviously an opportunity for me to make my own personal contributions to this space for video games. So, in my mind, I never thought that I would be in a position where I could even like submit my credentials and have them at least consider me. And so when the train started rolling along, I got that first phone call. I had mentioned there was like a series of interviews. I felt like each one after they ended, I'm like, oh well, that was a good try, like, but I'm sure I'm not going to get a call back, right? I got like super lucky, and then I get another call, and they wanted to have me meet with other people. And then that second interview ended, and I'm like, oh, that was a good run. I had like 2 interviews with Square Enix, but I don't think anything gonna come of it. And like it just kept happening and happening. And by the time it got to the end of the series of interviews, I was like, oh wow, this could actually be real. Like this could actually be like something that could manifest itself into like the next steps in my professional career. And now that I've been here for 4 years, like I felt like there's no time that's really passed, which is crazy.
Well, you clearly did all the right things in the interviews, and 4 years is more than just a drop in the bucket, especially in the video game industry. With Square Enix being such a large company, I'd imagine that you'd create projects. You have to manage a lot of different expectations and personalities in the room. Why don't you tell us some of the trials that you encounter as a web designer at Square and what it is you love about the work?
Sure. I think as far as the work is concerned, as a creative person, there's definitely no shortage of me having a say in the creative direction on how the branding is established or any of the marketing materials, which is very different from some of the earlier jobs that I've had in my career, where in comparison, I'm obviously like brought into the process way earlier, to the point where there's no establishing brand styles, or there's no branding guidelines established when I'm brought into these projects. And so being able to have influence on that stuff is incredibly humbling. And when you get it right and the community and the audience is identifying with it, it's such a gratifying experience that, like, as someone who's grown up with a lot of these franchises and these new franchises that are being introduced, or properties that are being reintroduced, it's incredibly rewarding when all the time and energy that you put into it just pays off and things are well received. At the end of the day, if I'm able to service myself and I can look at it and be genuinely excited as a fan, then it's very rewarding.
And that's a key component of being a working artist, is finding that medium where you can please both the client and still be pleased with your own work at the end of the day too. That's a lifelong struggle to find that balance, but it sounds like you're working on it.
Yes, absolutely. It's a challenge that I don't think ever really fully goes away. Just
not at all. Well, as much as we love Square Enix and the titles they're finally bringing over to us on the Switch, we are called the Nintendo nerds. The Square nerds just isn't as alliterative. So it's time to talk a little bit more about your Game Boy building. How'd you fall into this hobby? Was it the slippery slope of Raspberry Pi?
No. So as far as the whole, I call it a project, but it's kind of grown much bigger than that at this point, where I just wanted to do something where it utilized not only things that I've obviously gained through my professional career, obviously working with Square has been a big influence on this project, but also how do I do something as a side business where I also integrate my love for tinkering with things. And I think I speak for a lot of people in our generation in that the Nintendo Game Boy was probably one of the most, if not the most influential piece of hardware that sort of accompanied us through our childhood, our teenage years, and for some of us, it definitely is still really relevant, and that sort of evolved over time. With the Nintendo DS line, the 3DS, and now obviously Nintendo Switch. So this idea of being able to bring something with you that can be your outlet for entertainment, I think is something that most people can identify with. And I've been so involved with a lot of AAA titles, like these really big, massive games that have like tons of expectation, that for me it was, as a gamer especially, it's good to revisit some of the, I like to call them like the gaming essentials, where there were times where some of these retro games, it was definitely like designed by limitations, and in spite of certain design limitations, we have some games that are honestly masterpieces.
Agreed.
And
Yep.
I find that, at least like for me, there's a lot of titles on the Game Boy where obviously like we have the Pokemon franchise, the Zelda games that are on Game Boy are magnificent, the Kirby games, like all these like known IPs that Nintendo has been known for, their Game Boy counterparts could be seen as equals to their home console counterparts. And I thought that was really interesting.
I would go bananas if we got a Super Mario Land 2 remake for the Switch. Not the first one necessarily. I think that's the first one that would get remade, but the second one was just incredible.
Yes, it was.
Or the Wario Land.
Yeah.
There's some tremendous games for the Game Boy. I could completely agree.
You talking about the Game Boys and games like Pokemon, like it was such a game changer back then, because you gotta think there was like not a lot of games on the NES even that had like a save feature. But now with something like the Game Boy in the early 90s that came out, and then you had games like Pokemon come out where you could take your journey on the go with you, and at the time that was monumental.
Yeah, for sure. So I previously mentioned before we started recording that the most recent game that I played was the original Shenmue. So it's been this span of like 2 years where I've when I come home from work, I make it a point to try to revisit some of the legacy pieces of hardware and software. And when I started getting into the Game Boy stuff, it was actually through the aid of my girlfriend. Shout out to Lisa if she ends up listening to this.
Big up, Lisa.
Yeah. So we obviously are pretty close in age, and we both have that shared commonality of, being really invested into Pokemon, especially like during Gen 1 and Gen 2, that we were visiting this retro shop that is in Lower Tokyo in downtown LA. And it was just like total nostalgia trip where not only were there Game Boy stuff, but like there was like a pretty notable size of the Game Boy library there, where we just kind of went off on a tangent, like, oh, wouldn't that be fun if like we kind of got back into Game Boy and like we were both playing like Pokemon again and trying to complete the Pokedex. And $60 later, a piece, we walked out of the store and we both had Game Boys with Pokemon Red and Blue, and got home and just like totally got familiar again with the feeling of, that, at least like from a creative perspective for me, it's like, wow, this is a product of, being able to design something that's accessible in spite of limitations. And as I was replaying, Pokemon on Game Boy, I started to realize that in terms of it being able to hold up to our modern standards, this is obviously affected due to like our smartphones that we've been accustomed to, our computers, even like our other video game devices that we are playing right now, that it wasn't the game itself that felt dated, it was the hardware. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be like awesome if there was a way where, because I have such a fondness for the form factor of, in particular, the Game Boy Color, and obviously that is the line of Game Boys that I offer through Chroma Works. I have such a fondness for that form factor and the way that it looks, how it feels. It's just it's a pleasure for me to play on this particular Game Boy, as opposed to, the easy route would have been for me to just pick up the Game Boy Advance SP with a front or backlit screen and just call it a day. But there's just something about being able to play on a Game Boy Color that harkens back to those early days of me discovering my love for video games. And so that was the catalyst of me falling down this rabbit hole of like, is there a way where I can mod a Game Boy so that it has modern, accompaniments like the backlit screen? Or is there a way where I can integrate like a rechargeable battery with the micro USB or USB-C port? And there's a thriving community that I've discovered that's like super passionate about doing exactly that. And I spent the past 2 years just researching and networking with some of these other modders that honestly are super talented, and there's obviously people that are able to do more sophisticated modifications to gaming hardware than I am currently.
You're truly selling yourself short in this
you
moment.
You have to start somewhere.
Exactly.
They didn't all start building Cadillacs from the get-go.
Right, but it's as a way like for me to realize like, okay, this is like, I obviously have a drive to do this, and I'm already networking with this community of modders, and it's that
You have attainable goals that you can see in front of you, like, oh, I want to try that next, kind of thing.
Right, and the more I thought about it, I was like, I think I can actually do this, because some of these other services, there is that avenue of you being able to purchase a complete modded system from someone, but I actually wanted to take the time to get familiar with electronic components and like how things can be integrated together, even though they were never meant to be together, if that makes any sense. Because I'm sure Nintendo at the time, when they were doing R&D for the Game Boy Color, they never imagined a scenario where, oh yeah, like rechargeable batteries, like lithium ion, that's like 200 milliamps or 2000 milliamps. Like that just wasn't a thought. The technology wasn't there at the time, and so the merging of new and old was really fascinating to me. And through trial and error, I was able to get a working unit, and it caused such a reaction amongst my friends and coworkers that there were, numerous requests for people asking me to build them this, because, like, I think a lot of us are familiar with it. It's like, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. People are familiar with the Game Boy, and seeing something that is so polarizing, it's like, oh, this is like super familiar, but it has like all the modern accompaniments. It's like kind of fascinating. In some ways, it's kind of like more enticing, where it's like, oh, if I can play, like Mario Land or Kirby Tilt and Tumble on as close to the original hardware as possible, but it being easier to play on, right? Like
the convenience of not having to wait for the headlights on the freeway.
Oh my god, the worst was just ripping through a tunnel somewhere where all you got was it was like a strobe light of light on top of your screen, and you had to try and play.
Yeah. The worm lights were, I'm sure they were like the best-selling accessory, where it's like every Game Boy purchase, like everyone had to get the worm light so that, you can play at night, or just go to like Costco or Walmart and get the bulk size of AA batteries, so that you don't have to steal the batteries from the TV remote and you're wondering, why isn't the remote working? It's like, I don't know. So yeah.
How long does it take to build these, and do you have a favorite one that you built so far?
So, admittedly, one of the things that I can do a better job on is posting photos on my social, just because it's such I'm literally doing everything, right? Like, I'm doing the manufacturing, the marketing, and then like social. Unfortunately, like that's an area where I still need to invest some more time in. So I guess, like, just to put it on the record, I currently have 20 that are
wow.
right now. So in terms of the time for me to assemble one completely, it usually takes about 2.5 to 3 hours. Now that's considering once I get every component in-house. Now the time that it takes for those components to arrive, that's a whole nother timeline that needs to be considered, because I'm sourcing parts from various places that is either domestic here or international in China and Australia, that I usually have to order these in bulk in order for it to be worthwhile for the consumer and myself. That the way that I have my business model structured is I'll have pre-orders open for a set amount of time, and then the delivery time is 3 months after the closeout date. So once the orders are closed, that gives me time to do my bulk orders that I need to, and for everything to arrive, assemble it all together, make sure that like the packaging is like pristine and everything is like incredibly cared for. Because as a person that suffers from OCD and wanting to make something that is going to wow someone, like, it obviously, like, I want to make sure that a lot of the time and care gets put into these products that I'm selling, and it can take upwards to 2 to 3 months depending on if I have the parts on hand. But the assembly process itself, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours.
I have to say, your all-white number looks really slick. That was definitely my favorite. Do you have a personal favorite of the ones you've done so far?
The white one is for sure. I think it's that when you look at it, obviously it's familiar in that it's the Game Boy Color, but if you were around during the 90s, Nintendo definitely really honed in on color motif for obvious reasons, but that obviously went into the DNA of the hardware, where you had these really bright colors, for the shells of these devices, that I thought it would be kind of interesting to interpret the hardware almost as if it were a blank canvas, that the most colorful thing about the experience was going to be the content that you were going to consume.
The screen, I love that.
I love that concept. That's awesome.
So it kind of sounds like that's a good segue into our next question. It sounds sort of like your intuition is kind of naturally leading you to what Game Boy you design next. Where do you really get your ideas for what you're going to design?
So For me, I tend to look at it through the lens of an industrial designer when it comes to, if I am gonna design like my next Game Boy Color. I think it's no secret, like if anybody goes to my website, there's obviously a strong influence from Apple. That one of my design heroes is absolutely Johnny Ive in terms of industrial designer. I'm trying to find some kind of new way to present a familiar thing. I definitely take the phrase less is more to heart, and I think the all white Game Boy is absolutely a manifestation of that concept. And for the time being, because I'm not even a year old in terms of Chroma Works as an entity has not existed for longer than a year, but my passion for building Game Boys has obviously been longer than that. I kind of want to continue manufacturing specifically the two that I have on hand right now on my website, which is the all white one and a CNC aluminum model. That's the more premium one. So I'm basing my initial business on those two SKUs at the time being and trying to get established in the marketplace. And my intention for Chroma Works is not to be limited to just Game Boy specifically, and that kind of came with the challenge of what kind of persona or what kind of identity should this company be.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into being like, oh, Chroma Works is like only
Just the Game Boy guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's just my way of introducing products that had an impact on me, and this obviously goes beyond Nintendo. Like, I'm on a Dreamcast kick right now, and I can kind of see in the future where maybe once I see myself having time to try something new, like I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility that I can offer something like a modern take on the Sega Dreamcast, or a modern take on a Nintendo GameCube or a Nintendo 64. But for the time being, my passion is for the Game Boy Color. I've had numerous requests to do a modern Game Boy Advance because there's a segment of people that have a fondness for the advanced form factor, not the foldable SP one. That could be an opportunity as well, and I'm keeping an eye on what's being developed in terms of these parts that could be integrated with the legacy hardware. And the future is bright. But for right now, I'm getting ready to ship my first initial batch of launch orders, and I think the exciting part for me is going back to what I had mentioned earlier when I picked up my Game Boy Color with Lisa. So the retro game store that I've obviously been a customer of theirs since they opened. They actually put in an order for my Game Boys. So
That's tremendous.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so it's this full circle moment of like, oh wow, like this place that obviously left an impression on me in this whole pursuit of doing Game Boys. Like, they're actually going to carry my product on their shelf, and there's a lot that's riding on that for me personally, because if it goes well, I'm good friends with the store owner. He's pretty established, not only here in Los Angeles, but he has stores over in Japan. So I think it would be like such a trip, if things go super well and he orders more units, that like presumably one of these days when I go back to Japan on a vacation, like if I go to one of their shops to see my Game Boy, and I see like my Game Boy on their shelves, I think that would be such a moment of fulfillment for me. So it's all really exciting, and I think in spite of my continued involvement with this, I still carry my Game Boy in my backpack every day with me, and recently finished Link's Awakening. Even though it's such a bite-sized game compared to Breath of the Wild, it still manages to feel so massive in spite of it being on a Game Boy.
So we were just kind of curious to know what your influences are artistically, whether they be video game related, musicians, artists, anything.
Yeah, and I know that was a question that you guys have provided to me prior to this interview, and I generally had to think about it because there's so many folks that have influenced me and my particular taste as a creative person. That so I had mentioned earlier on Johnny Ive, who is now formerly from Apple. He's gone off to do, things on his own, but just from a technical perspective, and I think this will tie into my art influence, which is Yoshitaka Amano. He's a conceptual artist that has worked for Square Enix on conceptualizing the look of certain characters, and he's been part of the brand even still to this day. We work with him in various capacities, but I love how both Amano and Ive, they managed to do they managed to convey so much with so little in their respective fields, where you look at hardware design, you look at an iPhone, you look at an iPad, an iMac, an iPod, right? Like all these really advanced devices somehow manage to be so accessible for a mass market that we tend to not think about or realize how much time and investment is needed to get a product to be exactly that. And for Yoshitaka Amano, when I look at his art, I'm sure there'll be an instance where you'll show some screenshots of his artwork here, but it's very raw, right? If you've ever seen any of his work, that it's a little messy, it's a little sloppy, but what I love about it is that it's able to convey characters and location with it not being so refined.
So, if someone is curious about starting on their own building journey, where would you recommend they get started?
The Game Boy subreddit. If you're interested in, going and tinkering with Game Boys, like that community is thriving every day. It's very active
and very positive too. I linger on there sometimes as well. It's a very helpful community, I must agree.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
And so now that you're after your pre-order stage, is it time to hunker down and build, or are you going to actually get some time to play some of these games that you've been working on?
So right now, as I mentioned, like I have a numerous amount right now on my hands that they're nearly ready to go. I'm just waiting on just one last part, and thankfully it's not a very time-consuming addition to the build that once it arrives, these are literally ready to go and out to their buyers by the end of the month. I have opened up orders for Wave 2, which I think on my website it's batch 02, that I will call mention to you once I get these launch orders shipped out, because I think it's not very courteous to push the orders for a second wave of a product when like you're still working on trying to get the wave out. So I'm trying to do my due diligence and making sure that my launch buyers are taken care of, and then once those are out in the wild and they have them in their hands, then I'm going to be pushing pretty heavily into promoting my second batch of orders, that if all things go well, whoever decides to order on my website for batch 2, presumably they'll be able to get those in time for Christmas or for the holiday season. So that's the next step, is to work on the second wave.
Well, it sounds like a lot of love and care has gone into these things, so I'm sure that your clients are going to have nothing to worry about, and we hope that your first batch of orders goes really well, of course. We've got time for about one more question here, and we're curious to know, with full-time job with such a notable company, it seems like a certainty that you're pretty much eating, sleeping, and breathing RPGs and deeply engrossing storylines. Our question is, how do you find the energy to still love video games after spending all that time on them? We know you're big into music, but what are your other escapes? Is building these Game Boys scratching a different itch? Or maybe you just need some Smash Brothers time after you're done staring at all that dialogue all day long?
It's a tough question. We're asking you how you take time for yourself, but it sounds like you say, well, it's full steam ahead as a small business owner too.
That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, I think my answer for this, honestly, is Chroma Works. For me, whenever I invest myself in, hobby projects or passion projects, I tend to want to learn something new, where if I'm doing something and I'm investing time in it, I want to get something out of it. And for me, that comes from actually building the Game Boys themselves. That, you know, sometimes when I source these parts, you know, they're not usually in new condition, right? I don't usually buy complete Game Boy colors from eBay or, you know, any of these other outlets. I tend to source just the motherboard themselves, and, you know, in that particular case, when I get these motherboards in, they're not the greatest condition, right? Because these are boards that have been around since like 96, 97. And so they tend to need some love and care and refurbishing services. And that's something that I, at one point in time, I had no experience in, but I'm learning to be more comfortable with like restoring things to their proper state. And, you know, there are other aspects of the build that I'm obviously still learning and implementing, but nonetheless, it's all kind of feeding into that need of wanting to learn something new. And that's still absolutely scratching my itch. And I'm sure Lisa, at one point in time when we started to go down this retro rabbit hole, that she would have never thought that I would be sitting here on like a side business primarily selling Game Boys. And it's exciting. Like, she's been super supportive and obviously sees like the passion that comes out of it every day when I come home from work. That, you know, there's obviously that work-life balance, but it's kind of, it makes me kind of restless sometimes, where I just want to make sure that I'm building the best possible thing. So
It's
Backgirls, this sounds a lot like our journey of the Nintendo nerds and what we're trying to create and build here, and the way that we've felt over the last few weeks.
Truly, I think that when you find a hobby or a passion that you can put your whole self into, and all of a sudden you realize, where did the time go? Pay attention to that and see if you can turn that into something productive. And I think that's what we're trying to do, and that's definitely what you're doing with Chroma Works. Aaron, thanks so much for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it.
yeah, it's been fun trying to get the word out there. This is my first audio interview talking about obviously Chroma Works, but also, you know, my history with video games. That it's fun, you know, like this stuff doesn't feel like work to me, and it's always nice to connect with other people. Hopefully this will get some good exposure, and for anyone that has any questions, absolutely visit the website. I have a contact form on there, and all my social channels are listed there, and I'm not very hard to find. So if you like what you heard, definitely don't be a stranger, and yeah, get in touch.
Yeah, we'll make that easy for our listeners. For more information on Chroma Works, we'll include some links in the description below. If you're working on something already, sound off in the comments. We'd love to see what you're building. And, as always, we hope you leave this video ready to pick up a Pro Controller, a paintbrush, or a pen. I'm Backrolls.
I'm Mac Fraser, and this has been the Nintendo Nerds.